Hari Om, everyone.
Hari Om, sir.
Hari Om.
Hari Om.
Hari Om, everyone.
Hari Om.
Hari
Hari Om,
Om.
sir. And
Hari
all of
Om.
you.
Okay, let's start. प्रातः स्मरामि हृदि संस्फुरदात्मतत्त्वं सच्चित्सुखं परमहंसगतिं तुरीयम् यत्स्वप्नजागरसुषुप्तमवैति नित्यं तद्ब्रह्मनिष्कलमहं न च भूतसङ्गः तपोभिक्षीः पापानां शान्तानां वीतरागिणां मुमुक्षूणामपेक्षोऽयम् आत्मबोधो विधीयते बोधोऽन्यसाधनेभ्यो हि साक्षान्मोक्षैकसाधनम् पाकस्य वह्निवज्ञानं विना मोक्षो न सिद्ध्यति We'll chant from verses 25 to 29, chapter 4. Verse number 25 to 29. दैवमेवापरे यज्ञं योगिनः पर्युपासते ब्रह्माज्ञावपरे यज्ञं यज्ञेनैवोपजुह्वति दैवमेवापरे यज्ञं योगिनः पर्युपासते ब्रह्माज्ञावपरे यज्ञं यज्ञेनैवोपजुह्वति श्रोतादीनीन्द्रियाणन्ये संयमाग्निषु जुह्वति शब्दादीन् विषयानन्य इन्द्रियाग्निषु जुह्वति श्रोत्रादीनीन्द्रियानन्ये संयमाग्निषु जुह्वति शब्दादीन् विषयानन्य इन्द्रियाग्निषु जुह्वति सर्वाणीन्द्रियकर्माणि प्राणकर्माणि चापरे आत्मसंयमयोगाग्नौ जुह्वति ज्ञानदीपते सर्वाणीन्द्रियकर्माणि प्राणकर्माणि चापरे आत्मसंयमयोगाग्नौ जुह्वति ज्ञानदीपते द्रव्ययज्ञास्तपो यज्ञाः योगयज्ञास्तथा परे स्वाध्यायज्ञाय यज्ञाश्च यतयः संशितव्रताः द्रव्ययज्ञास्तपो यज्ञाः योगयज्ञास्तथा परे स्वाध्यायज्ञाय यज्ञाश्च यतयः संशितव्रताः अपाने जुह्वति प्राणं प्राणे पानं तथा परे प्राणापानगतिरुद्ध्वा प्राणायामपरायणाः अपाने जुह्वति प्राणं प्राणे पानं तथा परे प्राणापानगतिरुद्ध्वा प्राणायामपरायणाः Okay, chapter 4. We're going to be starting the 12 yajnas, section on the yajnas today. But before we start, are there any questions? Okay. Okay, we'll jump straight to the text then. Verse number 24. Brahmarpanam Brahmahavihi Brahmagnau Brahmanahutam Brahmaivatena Gantavyam Brahma Karma Samadhina. Beautiful verse where we saw the cognition that everything is Brahman, Brahma Satya Jagat Mithya. The reminder that everything has sprouted from the one underlying reality and everything will dissolve back into it. Everything is essentially the reality. As you grow spiritually, your sense of plurality, your sense of otherness, your sense of differentiation reduces, and you're able to recognize that one self in all beings. You're able to recognize that one reality underlying all things in all beings. You develop that unified vision. One who sees the unity in the diversity is Satvik. You'll hear that in chapter 18. One who sees the unity in the diversity. What is this unity? It's all Brahman. And that Brahman is the goal. Realizing that Brahman is the goal. That is my true nature. That is my real self. That Brahman is the reality of all things and beings. Everything is Nama Rupa. So seeing, remember this verse because it's going to really help you. And remember the verse, seeing inaction in action. Right? You remember that verse? Seeing inaction in action. That's going to be the theme of the next couple of verses. He's going to really draw it out through these yajnas. So the act of offering is Brahman, the oblation is Brahman, offered by Brahman into the fire of Brahman. He's describing a yajna, right? Offering, oblating into a fire. That's what we do in a yajna, that's what we do in a havan, right? There's a havan kund where the yajman places his offering into the fire of the yajna. So he's describing a yajna, the act of offering into a fire, and that fire sort of blazes. So he's saying in this entire yajna, the act of offering is Brahman. The oblation, what is being offered, is Brahman. Who is it offered by? It is offered by Brahman, the person, the offerer, the individual performing the yajna is Brahman. The fire into which you're offering is Brahman. Everything about this yajna is Brahman. So in every action, have that vision of the inactive principle, the inactive reality through all aspects of the action. As I told you last time, we chant this verse before eating. There's a verse worth chanting. See, one level is to say, okay, thank you God for the food you put on our plate, and thank you God for all the blessings, and all of these things are good. If you're not thankful, at least start being thankful. But beyond being thankful, this is a deeper prayer, right? So to someone who has no conception, someone who's a brutish beast, as Shakespeare would say, Someone who's barbaric, you teach them the attitude of gratitude. That's the starting of prayer. But as you grow your prayer, this is a deeper prayer which we chant before we eat. And what is this prayer reminding us? That, oh Lord, I'm eating to live, I'm not living to eat. All eating, all actions are a means to live and achieve my higher goal. My life out here is not to be consumed in mere worldly aggrandizement and fleeting enjoyment. It has a higher purpose. That's the essence of chanting this verse before we eat. And eating is one of the most, it symbolizes our helplessness in action. If you're not mindful, then we lose control of that action. Right? So bringing mindfulness in action, bringing awareness in action, realigning our purpose in action is symbolized with chanting this verse. Memorize it if you can. Brahmarpanam brahmahavihi brahmagno brahmanahutam brahmaiva tena gantavyam brahma karma samadhina. Verse number 25. दैवमेवापरे यज्ञं योगिनः पर्युपासते ब्रह्माज्ञावपरे यज्ञं यज्ञेनैवोपजुह्वति दैवमेवापरे यज्ञं योगिनः पर्युपासते ब्रह्माज्ञावपरे यज्ञं यज्ञेनैवोपजुह्वति. Some yogis perform sacrifice to gods. Daiva. Some yogis perform sacrifice to gods. Others perform sacrifice by offering sacrifice itself in the fire of Brahman. Some yogis perform sacrifice to gods. Others perform sacrifice by offering sacrifice itself in the fire of Brahman. If you're lost, don't worry. The first time I read this verse, I had no idea. What is this? Why speak like this? Some yogis perform sacrifice to gods, others perform sacrifice by offering sacrifice itself in the fire of Brahman. Before we jump into it, now the next 3, 4, 5 verses is going to be helpful to remember the concept of a yajna, the concept of a havan. What is in a havan? There is a person, a sacrificer, right? In which case he's called a yogi in this verse, right? A yogi is one who is on the spiritual path, who's performing a yajna. So the person who's performing the sacrifice, and in the havan, in the yajna, there is a havan kund, right? There's a field of activity, there's a havan kund. In that havan kund, there's a fire, and that fire symbolizes your goal, your ideal, that to which you surrender, that to which you offer all your efforts. So, in a way, your deity, right? The fire represents your deity. It's deified. Your goal is deified. So, your goal, your ideal is represented by the fire, and therefore you offer. Your offering symbolizes your efforts. Whatever you offer symbolizes your efforts, whatever you bring to the table. Generally in a yajna, we offer some grains and some samagri, it's called, right? So that represents our efforts. And whatever we offer from our efforts, as we put it into the fire, then the fire blazes. That represents the result of our efforts. right? So if the fire blazes well, it's considered fruitful, it's considered auspicious. If the fire doesn't react, it's considered inauspicious, right? Idea is that, okay, I'm performing some action and there is some positive result of it, there is some outcome of it, as opposed to there being no result or no outcome. So remember this symbolism of a yajna. So what does he say? First of all, this verse is talking about the first two yajnas in the cycle of 12 yajnas, the first two yajnas. So yajna, as you know, represents the action, right? And through the 12 yajnas, we'll be covering all the entire sequence of action, from receipt of stimuli to reaction within to response, to from outward action, from inward action to outward action, from perception to reaction to response, everything. So that's going to be the theme. Now in this the first verse, he talks about the first two yajnas. Any action begins with an intention, a why. Right? Why am I doing this? So he says some yogis perform sacrifice to gods. For some yogis, the why is they perform sacrifice to gods. Others perform sacrifice by offering sacrifice itself in the fire of Brahman. Okay, the yogi is the performer of the yajna, right? Here the gods represent the fire. What is the fire? For some yogis, the fire is the gods, the deities. We've said before, the deities, the gods, are a beautiful and incredible construct of the sages. To plant a god, a goddess, wherever the human mind falls, so that even if the human mind doesn't go to God, you bring God to the human mind. So in whatever field of activity in the world, to transform your action from egoistic to unselfish, to give it a slightly higher direction, any worldly action, we have planted gods and goddesses. So performing sacrifice to gods represents performing worldly action in a spirit of service and sacrifice, performing unselfish action. So some yogis perform sacrifice to gods. What this means is they offer the efforts, they pour their efforts into unselfish action, in a spirit of surrender, in a spirit of dedication. This is the bare minimum to be called a yogi. Otherwise, you're not a yogi. If you don't have this attitude of unselfish action, you're not a yogi, you're a bhogi. Right? If this much we can't do, then we're not yogis. So some yogis offer to the fire of the devtas, Daivam, the deities that govern and protect and control the various aspects of the world, be it wealth, health, success, power, everything. So some yogis perform sacrifice to gods. If you're not performing sacrifice, if you don't have the attitude of playing your part, if you don't have the attitude of the spirit of surrender, then you're not a yogi, and there's no yajna. what does it mean? As opposed to performing selfish action, as opposed to performing egoistic action, as opposed to performing action with an attachment for the result. All of these are not yajna, right? So some yogis perform sacrifice to gods. Others perform sacrifice by offering sacrifice itself in the fire of Brahman. Others, they take it a step ahead. For them, the fire doesn't remain the various deities. The fire is the ultimate fire of Brahman. Their pursuit, their goal, their ideal is not only unselfish action, but self-realization, enlightenment. They've changed gears, they switched gears on the spiritual path. They offer into the fire of Brahman. What do they offer? What do you have to offer? What turns your action from unselfish to selfless? What is that thing which turns your action from unselfish to selfless?
Without ego. Without ego.
Without ego. That's the only difference. The action is the same. The action is the same. The only difference between selfless and unselfish and selfless action is there's no sense of I am doing this. There's no sense of I am sacrificing. There's a quiet alignment with the universe. This is my part, I'm playing it to the best of my ability. So, what are you sacrificing into the fire of Brahman? You are sacrificing sacrifice itself, means you're sacrificing your very sense of doership. Oh, I am sacrificing. There's nothing to sacrifice. Very frankly, there's nothing better for you to do out here. Be grateful that you can play your part. Be grateful that you've been given a role. Otherwise, you'd be some useless fellow sitting in the corner. Like John Milton. You know John Milton? Beautiful poem he wrote on his blindness. The Lord took away his eyesight and he was distraught. He said, now what will I sacrifice? What will I give? What will I offer to you? Oh Lord, this was my offering to you. That was the Lord's lesson. You don't have to worry about what you're doing and what you're not doing. They also serve who only stand and wait. They also serve who only stand and wait. That is, don't develop any ego in your action, even if it's a good action. That's the highest spiritual attitude in action. So those yogis who are geared up for the highest goal of Brahman, what do they have to offer to the altar of Brahman? They offer their entire ego. They offer their very sense of sacrifice. Now you've understood this we've explained this in 15 minutes, right? Swamiji didn't give it so easily to us. And Swamiji says, I think he took at least a couple of months to come to a satisfactory understanding of this verse. There are many different interpretations. If you read other commentaries, and don't jump into all of that right now, in your own time. First, understand what one master is saying, and then you can explore. No issues. But a verse like this will have slightly different interpretations in different contexts. But this is a beautiful interpretation that Swamiji gives out here.
But what is the difference between what we read in Karma Yoga and this? This is the same thing, exactly the same thing. In Karma Yoga also, we are doing action, leaving our egocentric desires. And that is unselfish. And then it becomes to selfless. So the first yagya becomes unselfish and the second yagya becomes selfless.
Don't take away the melody, don't take away the the beauty of expression. Okay,
Sure.
we are trying to say the same thing in 100 different melodies.
No, I was just trying to understand whether I am understanding the same now.
Melody. This is a melody. Huh? One who's in love with the melody will never say, "Oh, you're saying the same thing," right? So I'll repeat it again and again. What I'm only trying to convey is, coming to that interpretation from this verse is, because he's speaking in riddles. That's all. So, Yajna starts with intention. Yajna starts with what is my purpose? What is my goal? So, first of all, spiritual journey starts with unselfish action. So, some yogis perform unselfish action, others perform selfless action. So, different gear. So, Yajna 1 and Yajna 2. Yajna 1 is unselfish action, Yajna 2 is selfless action. Yes, Ankit.
We are talking about the capacity to sacrifice and working for this absolute ideal is sort of seeming like you start with offering the sacrifice, but is it more like an effect, like is this a process rather than just a thing that you do, like it's not the inception of something but rather the culmination of certain efforts. Like you can't decide to uh, sacrifice to an absolute ideal. You just get there over a passage of time.
Yeah, how it plays out, practically is precisely this. You can't jump into selfless action, right? Because of all the self-importance that we give ourselves. So our exaggerated sense of self-importance makes us perform selfish action. We first have to change it to unselfish action. And then slowly, gradually, it's it's almost like a little bird that speaks to you, you know, that hey, let your ego also go, right? So in a way, it's an effect of growth, no doubt about it, right? But there's, studying about it, reading about it definitely gives us an indication that this is the direction. Yet the next stage of growth is giving up your sense of doership itself, right? So it's not going to be easy one fine day for you to say, "Oh, I'm going to sacrifice itself." It's a reminder. You'll have to remind yourself,
Okay.
because as you get into unselfish actions, you'll notice the tendency to become mindful of your action. You'll notice the tendency to become, expect something. You'll notice the tendency, your own mind's tendency to have a sense of superiority almost. That's when you have to remind yourself of your sacrifice itself. You're just playing your part. Shut up. You're nothing. You're you're a spoke in the wheel. You're a speck in the cosmos, right? Just forget you. Take you out of the picture. That's what you have to remind yourself, right? So as you get into performing unselfish action, you'll notice your own internal mind's tendency to become mindful of these things. Like it's a subtle ego. And with lessons like this, you have to remind yourself and slowly dismiss that I, me, my, right?
It's a iterative exercise, not a one.
Definitely, it's an iterative exercise. I mean, we only conceptualize this into concepts only for the sake of understanding. But how any of these concepts, not only this, any of these concepts and play out is it's an iterative. We always say, okay, it's a spectrum. You're growing in phases and stages, right? Sure, the penny may drop one fine day, right? Suddenly, it may be a sudden awakening, but a lot goes into that awakening in the background, slowly, gradually, and it's meant for your experimentation. It's not meant for you to just try to understand this in the text. It's meant for your experimentation and iteration uh, through life experience, right? This is only to give you conceptual understanding that there is unselfish action, and the next gear is selfless. Now, most cars come with only 5 gears, some come with 7. Right? So most of us are only involved in maybe only take this up to a level, but those who sort of want to push it beyond, they shift to the highest gear, which is selflessness. Verse number 26. So again, for those of you who have the text, I would highly recommend reading this section, and particularly this diagram that comes out here. Oops, 1 second. Yeah, this diagram that comes. So in your cycle of action, it begins with your ideal. What is your goal? What is your purpose? So your limited ideal, unselfishness, is a limited goal, limited ideal, whereas selflessness is the absolute goal. Enlightenment, realization is the absolute ideal. So number 1 and number 2, yajna number 1 and yajna number 2. And now we'll go through the entire cycle. So any action begins with perception. It begins with your receipt of stimuli. So having set up an intention, as you step into action, any action begins with the receipt of stimuli from the world. So what do you do? How do you turn your perception into worship? Verse number 26. Shrotraadinindriyananye samyamagnishu juhvati shabdadin vishayananya indriyagnishu juhvati. Shrotraadinindriyananye samyamagnishu juhvati shabdadin vishayananya indriyagnishu juhvati. Others offer hearing and other senses as sacrifice into the fires of restraint. Others offer sound and other sense objects as sacrifice into the fires of the senses. Again, this verse is depicting 2 yajnas, and the second line should actually come before the first. For poetic reasons, it's the other way around, but the interpretation this verse offers places the second line before the first, in the sense that the second line is actually the 3rd yajna and the first line is the 4th yajna. So what is the second line? Others offer sound and other sense objects as sacrifice in the fire of the senses. What is perception? Perception is when stimuli from the outside world reaches your senses and becomes into a awareness, right? When stimuli reaches your senses and your senses become aware of them, that's what a perception is. That's when we say you perceive. So what's happening out here? Here he's defined the senses. What is the fire? Remember, again, always remember this concept. There's an offerer, there's a fire, and there's a result of that offering, right? There's an offering, there's a fire, and the result of that offering. So the offering is called the ahuti. The offering is called the ahuti, and the fire is the deity. So here he's turning Here he is giving the senses. In perception, the senses are the deity. You're offering to the senses, and what's resulting is perception. What are you offering to the senses? You're offering sound and other sense objects. You're offering the various stimuli. Sound represents sound is used to collectively represent all sense objects. Sound, taste, smell, sight, everything. All sense objects, all sense stimuli that reach the senses are the offering, and they are offering into the fire of the sense organs. So when you offer stimuli to the sense organs, what results is a perception. You may say, what is the worship in this? You may say, big deal. What is the worship in this? In a way, the sense organ itself is not the deity. The sense organ is not the deity. It's the underlying capacity to sense. It's that underlying capacity to perceive. What is it that makes your ears hear? You're offering sound into the ear, right? You're offering a stimulus. You're offering a sound wave into the ear, and you're becoming aware. You're perceiving. What is that power that makes me perceive? Stimuli are reaching your eyes right now. What is that power that makes you see? You may say it's the optical nerves. What is the power that makes your optical nerves work? You may say it's electric signals from the brain. What is the power that brings those electric signals in the brain and makes them function meticulously? What is it? What is that underlying power of the senses? That's the deity. So when you have this awareness, your focus shifts from what you are perceiving to what makes you perceive. What you're perceiving is not important. Whether you're listening to beautiful bhajan or whether you're listening to hip hop music, doesn't matter. Which is why for a spiritual person, it doesn't matter what they're listening to. One who is already spiritual, it doesn't matter what they're listening to. Their focus is on what's making me hear. It doesn't matter what they're seeing, because their focus is on what's making me see. When your mind is attuned to that deity of the senses, that deity of perception, you're not caught up in what you're seeing or what you're hearing or what is being said and what is not being said. What's that power with which I see? What's that power with which I hear? What is that which is making me perceive? So in and through any perception, what differentiates a bhogi from a yogi? What differentiates a spiritual person from a non-spiritual person? A non-spiritual person is caught up in what is being said, what is not being said, what is being seen, what is not being seen. A spiritual person is attuned to that mystical question: what's making me hear? And it's an astounding awareness. It's spooky. And you have an attitude of bowing to it, of surrendering to it. That power with which my senses see, I bow to it. So, offering sound and other sense objects into the deity of the senses, the fire of the senses, and what results is perception. Now, what happens after perception? You can either let a perception continue, and if perception continues, it will develop a very strong desire. In fact, all your desires are a result of unchecked perception, uncontrolled perception, uncontrolled listening, seeing, feeling. And when you have very strong desire, you become unrestrained, you become uncontrolled. If you develop too many thoughts of I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do this, you will become uncontrolled. Your mind will force you to do it. So all our desires develop and strengthen through uncontrolled perception. You can see this very clearly in a child. You let them perceive something and keep it unchecked. Slowly, slowly, they'll become glued to it, become uncontrollably attached to it. So all our strong desires are a result of uncontrolled perception. So on the spiritual path, it's very important to control our perception until we are already perfect. Once we are perfect, there's no issue. So we are only talking because we're not perfect, right? The mind always has a tendency to grow attached and involved in our perceptions. So what is required is restraint. Restraint at a material level, restraint at a physical level, restraint at the level of all the senses. You need a restraint at the level of your sound, your sight, your taste, your touch, your smell, everything. Why? Because any one perception, if it is uncontrolled, Adi Shankaracharya says, even one sense weakness can destroy you. Some people may have a strong sense of, a control over their touch, but not over their taste. Right? Some people may have control over their taste, but not over their touch. So if one of the senses is weak, it can lead to all sorts of drama in your life. So what happens after perception? After perception comes the practice of restraint, of self-restraint. And this restraint, remember, we always say this restraint is not something that can be imposed from outside. It's a self-regulation. This restraint has to come out of an awareness. And this self-regulation comes out of a clarity of who you want to be, where you want to go, what you want to become, what you want to grow into. There's no shortage of motivation in the world, but what is it that you want to push yourself towards? So this self-restraint, that's why it's called self-restraint and self-imposed restraint. It's not restraint that someone else is imposing on you. So once the perception happens, others offer this perception, others offer hearing and other senses and other sense perceptions into the fires of restraint. So here the deity is self-restraint, and you're offering your perception. When you offer all your perceptions into this capacity to self-regulate, what happens? What is the result? It is self-control. You become a controlled person. You become a self-regulated person. You become a person who is able to be stable, not easily disturbed or easily rattled. So he's going to talk about self-control in the next verse. Sarvani indriya karmani pranakarbani chapare atma samyama yogagnam juhvati jnana deepite सर्वाणि इन्द्रियकर्माणि प्राणकर्माणि चापरे आत्मसंयमयोगाग्नौ जुह्वति ज्ञानदीपिते. Others sacrifice all the functions of the senses and the functions of the vital layers into the fire of yoga of self-control, kindled by wisdom. Jnana Deepite. Others sacrifice all the functions of the senses and all the functions of the vital layers, the pranas, into the fire of yoga of self-control, kindled by wisdom. So, perception happens. Perception, when self-regulated, leads to self-restraint. Now, in the beginning, you have to make a lot of effort to control and regulate your habits and tendencies. In the beginning, you have to always remind yourself, you may have to place some limitations, some demarcations, you may have to set up some rules for yourself, what you can do, what you cannot do. You have to have a discipline imposed upon yourself. But as you grow, kindled by wisdom, that's what he means by kindled by wisdom in verse number 27. Once the penny drops, once you grow, once wisdom has settled in you, then restraint is not effortful. In the beginning, you have to put in effort to restrain. In the beginning, you have to put in effort to control. After a point of time, when you grow, when you become wise, you become a controlled person by nature. So all the functions of the senses and all the functions of the pranas, whether you're eating, sleeping, seeing, perceiving, all the pranic functions, you offer into the fire of yoga of self-control, Atma Samyama Yoga. You become automatically a controlled person, not only in what you perceive, but how you react to those perceptions, how you respond to those perceptions. You are no longer an impulsive person. You are no longer easily rattled. You are measured. You are grounded. You are stable. And all of this is a result of wisdom. And all of this is a prerequisite to meditation. All of this is a prerequisite to becoming meditative. So, very intentionally, he calls it a yoga of self-control, because it's an essential practice, it's an essential qualification in the journey of yoga. Now, this self-control doesn't come easily and it doesn't come overnight. But as you grow above, so let's come back. What causes a loss of control? What causes a loss of control is too much desire. And what causes too much desire? It's unchecked perception. Right? Take 2 steps back. Uncontrolled desire leads to loss of control. Very strong desire leads to loss of control. And unchecked perception leads to multiplication of desires. So the entire journey, the entire process in having set up a higher ideal, having set up a higher goal, the entire process starts with a control in your perception, what you are receiving, what you are taking in, and a regulation, having taken in a regulation and moderation. But ultimately, it's knowledge alone. Only when knowledge settles in you, when it turns into wisdom, that all this practice of regulation, moderation, restraint turns into real self-control. And once you're self-controlled, there's no effort required. Once you're self-controlled, it becomes a habit. It's effort to indulge. Huh? It's an effort to indulge. It almost doesn't sit with your constitution. So, very clearly, you're offering all the functions of the senses and all the functions of your pranas and all these things into the fire of self-control, the yoga of self-control. Verse number 28. Dravya yajnastapo yajnaha yoga yajnastatha pare swadhyaya yajnaya yajnascha yataya samshitavrataha. Dravya yajnastapo yajnaha yoga yajnastatha pare swadhyaya yajnaya yajnascha yataya samshitavrataha. Rituji, you have a question?
Just wanted to ask, of course, maybe later. You said knowledge turns into wisdom. Of course, I kind of understand a little bit, but if you could just slightly more elaborate it, maybe later.
No, we'll elaborate it right now. So, knowledge turns into wisdom through your effort to understand, comprehend, question, deliberate, experiment, iterate. Through all of this effort put into knowledge, it turns into wisdom. Knowledge taken once a week through passive reading and listening doesn't turn into wisdom. Huh? Twice a week. To help us, we made it twice a week. Which is why people don't see any significant outcome of most of their, spiritual engagements, because for them it's a part-time entertainment. But to bring about serious change, any genuine change, you need to listen deeply, consider, question, comprehend, articulate. All of these are still intellectual exercises. Then experiment, iterate, be patient. All of this process, going deep even intellectually and experimenting, all of this turns knowledge into wisdom. That's when it becomes lived experience. And when you have wisdom, you live it. When you have wisdom, it becomes your nature. Then you won't see what is knowledge. What is knowledge? You should think the best for others. Don't be jealous of them. Don't be greedy. This is knowledge. But what happens? Suppose I tell you that peer of yours who you know for 30 years, she just won a jackpot. How does that make you feel? Or he or she just got recognition. How does that make you feel? When you are genuinely happy within, when there's no iota of jealousy within, that's when you know there's wisdom. Otherwise, don't worry. Remind yourself of knowledge. What happens? Most of us try to pretend like we are not jealous, but inside we are entertaining jealousy. That's hypocrisy. from the outside showing something and from the inside feeling something else. So wisdom is when knowledge manifests automatically. It becomes your nature. And that's a journey, it's a process, right? A lot of pile driving of knowledge is required in it. You have to drill it in. And then, of course, as I said, experimenting with it, trying to live with it. Lived experience, no doubt, makes all the difference.
Sir, can I?
There are those who
Like,
come with wisdom.
sorry. Yeah.
There are those who come with wisdom. For them, only you just remind themselves, you just remind them of this, and they know it, right? So, similarly, if some knowledge really resonates with you, it only indicates that this is not the first time you're hearing it. You know, in your karmas, you brought it with you, right? It's only maybe a last mile which you have to perhaps, remind yourself and re-implement. But nonetheless, that journey from knowledge to wisdom has all these stages of deep listening, of reflection, of questioning, of comprehending, of experimenting. All of these things goes into turning knowledge into wisdom. Yeah, sorry, you were saying.
No, sir. Just saying that sometimes we've heard man of perfection. So, Gyani, uh, true Gyani, is someone who has this applied, like we're just talking about, to have knowledge and to have wisdom. Very, very simply put, very simply put, can we say it is applied knowledge? I mean, when you can internalize it, the knowledge, when you can actually act upon it instinctively without having a thought, uh, that that sort of a thing.
Yeah, I like the word wisdom better instead of
Yes,
applied.
sir.
But
Yeah, I'm sure, sir. I'm sure, sir. Yes, I definitely understand what you're saying.
Balaji, if you're
Hari
saying
Om. Hari Om. Yeah, I'm in the traffic. You are talking about selfless action. So, in the case of a selfless action, it is an action done through you, not by you. So, which means only a self-realized person, whatever actions he does, is a selfless action. Is my understanding right?
in a way, yes. In a way, true selflessness only is achieved. It's both the path and the goal in the sense, right? So true selflessness is only achieved when there's no self left, and that's only when you are self-realized, right? So sure, theoretically yes, but what's the question?
So, can we say it happens? That is, the selfless action happens on its own.
As I said, like anything in this spiritual journey, it happens on its own, but not without your effort. What I mean to say is, this is a path of constant self correction. It's a path of constant sort of, removing the impurities. Nirmala, you have to become Nirmala, you have to remove the Mala, right? And when Nirmala manifests, it manifests as selflessness, it manifests as no egoism. But it happens by itself only after you remove the impurities. Does that make sense? Your job is to only,
Got it, got it. Sorry, I'm in the traffic.
yeah. All I'm trying to say is that it doesn't happen by itself without your effort. Your effort, you cannot practice selflessness, but your effort can only help you to remove dirt, to remove impurity. You become selfless. Okay, we'll take up the 28th verse in the next class. Dravya Yajna. So, just to recap, we've covered all the internal actions, right? We've covered the internal process of action. Now, next verse, 20th verse, is going to talk about external actions. But internally, this entire thread of action starts with intention. Then there is perception. Perception leads to restraint. Restraint leads to self-control, maturity, right? So this path to spiritual maturity starts with intention, and very important is when you are perceiving, where is your thought? When you are restraining, where is your thought? Automatically control will follow. So I would highly recommend you read the verses, read the commentary. Swami has given quite a comprehensive commentary on this, and come back with questions. We'll be happy to answer them. We'll see you again on Tuesday next week. Have a good weekend. Thank you so much.